Good morning, friends. Thanks for joining us here at Journey Home Meditation for the Morning Sit. I'm Michael, and I am very happy to be here. I'm happy for you too. So, which is it? Am I Michael, or am I happy? Am I happy to be here, or am I this other thing? There's all these layers and levels to identity. I really like. I've got a lot of friends from the UK and um, and also from Ireland, friends from Wales, um, family from Wales as well, but I don't I don't keep in touch with them. I don't know them since my grandmother passed. I've never kept in touch with my Welsh family, but uh, the point of that is to say uh, I really appreciate the way that um, it's spoken, that someone is called something. So I would say I'm called Michael instead of I am Michael. This use of the definitive I am this or I am that, um, it is a bit confusing because it does double down on this sense of identity, right? Um, it it drills in this idea that someone is this thing, and we do it often, especially when we're trying to diminish someone. We This person is a jerk. This person is an asshole, and it instead of understanding maybe that this person and myself are in conflict, or maybe this person is behaving like an asshole, we define a person, we define ourselves. My favorite is when you're talking about food, you offer somebody food and, oh, would you like some hummus? Oh, I'm not really a hummus guy. Oh, you're not a hummus guy? Like, you're not made of ground chickpeas and tahini? That's good to know. Or are you not a Middle Eastern superhero, hummus guy? I'm not a hummus guy. Yeah, cracks me up. And it's just simple wordplay, and it's not to be taken too seriously, I suppose. But I do wonder sometimes about the more long-term effect of being raised in a culture that uses definitives to describe ourselves and others. Um, yeah, it's a curiosity. But that's not really what was on my mind this morning. That just popped into my silly little walnut-shaped brain as I was saying good morning to you all. What was on my mind this morning, and maybe it's okay to come back to it. Maybe we should just move on and continue talking about hummus guy. But I was thinking about compassion, um, and not simply because that's the spiritual guy thing to do. I was thinking about it because in the work that I do, being in, I guess this is a social service or public service, working with nonprofits and in a position that serves different people, different populations. Um, we hear the term compassion fatigue often, and if you're in the service industry at all, like especially not necessarily like food service, I don't think In most of the kitchens I ever worked at, the word compassion was not used very often, except for when I worked at Sundance Cafe. It was actually my first real job in Tucson, Arizona. It's a little vegetarian cafe. And, it was a wonderful job. It was one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. Uh, and it set the foundation for my favorite meal to this day. Just simple brown rice with fava beans. uh, but that's a squirrel that I'm chasing there. The word compassion was something that it's not really used in a lot of jobs that we have, but it is used quite often in the service industry, the industries of being of service. Whether it's recovery support or mental health support, whether it's working with impoverished populations or elders or people of varying levels of abilities and disabilities. Uh, this word always comes up as a warning, just be careful for compassion fatigue. And then there's this nice little brief explanation on compassion fatigue, but they don't really talk about it. They just make the assumption that it's embedded in the premise of saying the words compassion fatigue. And it drills into us this idea that we are scarce, we have scarcity. It reinforces the notion that we are drawing from a finite well of compassion, and we have to be very selective as to who is deserving of compassion and who is not. And if we overuse our compassion, then we'll pay the price. And this is one of the most wrong things I've ever heard in the plethora of terribly wrong and bad ideas that those in the mental health uh, upper echelons in Western medical sciences have to offer. The notion of compassion fatigue, especially, it's always sort of targeting the lowest level workers, right? It's targeting peer support specialists, it's targeting support staff, it's targeting KDACs or counselors, it's targeting people a bit lower on the hierarchy of importance in the mental health industry to beware of compassion fatigue. And I'm sure that if you've ever had to go through mental health support that is state sponsored, meaning, the mental health support that's available for poor people, um, you'll well know the strong and thick barrier that tends to exist between you and a therapist, a psychologist, or psychiatrist. The higher up on the echelon that you go, the thicker the wall is, the emotional block. I actually was hospitalized in my youth for a few months for suicidal ideation and attempts, and just overall piss poor mental health. Really having no understanding or grasp of trauma and the effect of childhood trauma on my life. You know, pretty average story, really. Went from being an overachieving child to just not living up to my potential pretty quickly. And had some struggles with substance use, struggles with uh, self-harm. And I was hospitalized in the state of Arizona. And I just remember having one of my doctors who never even looked at me. I would sit and I would watch intently to wait to make eye contact. And the entire time, this doctor had their eyes just looking at paperwork and a computer and typing in my answers and adjusting my medications and typing in more answers and adjusting medications. And um, I remember one day, I was expressing to the doctor that the medications aren't exactly the fix it, right? They're not doing anything to get to the core of what I was feeling. And he said, "Well, we're gonna try this and this." And I closed my eyes and I asked him what color my eyes were. And he said, "I'm sorry." And I kept my eyes closed and I said, "What color are my eyes?" And he said, "Mr. Franklin, I'm not sure how that's relevant." And I said, "Well, if you haven't even looked me in the eyes, how can you talk about what's happening in my mind?" And that was a turning moment for myself, in understanding that compassion wasn't a core value within these systems. And then years later, decades later, I start working in the field, and all the rage now is, you know, talking about compassion fatigue. We're in these trainings and we're on these video conference trainings and we're being told about compassion fatigue, as if I could run out of what it is that makes me feel connected to other human beings. As if there's a finite amount of humanness inside of me that longs for connection and has the ability to see the humanness in others. And this is what compassion is. Compassion is the ability to see the humanness in another person without judging the choices that we perceive them to have made. And so I've been talking with my wife, Angela, about this for a couple of years now. And she used a phrase that really hit direct. Like when you're a kid, you're playing Battleship and you get a direct hit. It was a direct hit into what I was feeling, what I feel about when I hear compassion fatigue. I've been calling it capitalism fatigue. But she said the words moral injury. You're receiving a moral injury. Because what I'm experiencing and what I see people experiencing when it's getting labeled as compassion fatigue in this work is we come up against like these strong walls of resistance to what it actually requires of us to care for another human being, right? As we move up the echelons of the hierarchy of power within these mental health agencies, and we are trying to provide the services and resources that are needed for people to not only survive but to begin healing and coming into their own agency in this world. We continue to hit roadblocks, and we are told that this is not within our job description. This is not within the boundaries, the ethical boundaries of the company to provide these services. And that is a moral injury. That is a deflating and defeating sense that you feel, and it has nothing to do with the compassion you have for the person you're working to serve. It has everything to do with the lack of compassion with the people that you are working with to serve. And this was my experience time and time again within the fields of Western psychiatry, within Western mental health sciences. And it's been striking me as I work in harm reduction, which is kind of this bastard stepchild of Western mental health. It comes in sort of guns blazing. I don't really like the militaristic language, but I'm trying to figure out a way to say it. It just comes in full bore, right? It plows through the boundaries and the the barriers. There it is. That's the word. It plows through the barriers that have been put into place by this gatekeeping sort of Western way that we view our healing. And in this work, working with other harm reduction agencies, I have experienced very, very little what would be called compassion fatigue. Because my experience has been, when your goal to serve is to reduce harm, then you are willing to stand in the way of that which is harmful. You're willing to make that step because you understand what it means to a person when someone is willing to help reduce the harm that's occurring in your life. And I think that these practices are not just for the nonprofit sector, these are spiritual practices. Now, if you were to say that at a round table of harm reductionists, you'd probably come up against a few groans and grunts from a few folks, because the idea of spirituality has been so relegated to this institution of domination and control and uh, pie in the sky kind of thought processes. A better world awaits us out there. Um, but that's not where I come from. And I see these practices as deeply compassionate practices, deeply compassionate. And I see compassion as one of the core values of a spiritual practice. If your spiritual practice does not include understanding your deep connection to every living thing on this planet, which is everything, it's everything, from every rock to every tree, every four-legged and two-legged, it's everything. If your spiritual practice does not include understanding your deep connection and moving beyond your rigid identities based around that, of who I think I am and who I think you are, then your spiritual practice is lacking. It's lacking. And that's not a judgment of other people's practices. That's just saying this value is a core value to understanding how to love deeply. Compassion is a core value in learning how to love deeply. And compassion is not something you have for others, and it's not something you find for yourself. There's not self-compassion and compassion for others. There's compassion. The word actually means shared suffering. There is shared suffering. And, as we start learning more about trauma and the effects of it, we go through these experiences where we start to do the Western thing and start to label all of these different, identifiable behaviors and characteristics. And one of those identifiable behaviors and characteristics of trauma is a phrase that people are now using called trauma bonding. These people are trauma bonding. And this has sort of nebulous uses, right? Sometimes we talk about trauma bonding being between someone who is violating someone and someone who's being violated. There might be a trauma bond of some sort there. That's, we've called that Stockholm syndrome in the past. There's all these ways that we like to reduce and neatly wrap up entire experiences in this culture. But in some sense, we do bond with others who share an identifiable suffering. There is a bond. There's a bond between people who don't even know each other personally. They don't know each other's personalities, but they know that they've gone through the same thing. This is why people gravitate towards 12-step programs. This is why people gravitate towards support groups of others who share the same experience. That is a first step towards a greater compassion, the shared suffering. And I just don't see how any rational, logical, or feeling person could make the step to say, I only have so much compassion to give. I can only understand and connect other human beings so much that if I start to go beyond that, I become exhausted and I harden my heart and I close myself off. I don't think that's what's happening. I think becoming depleted by consistently coming up against barriers for things that simply don't have any natural explanation. That's real. That's capitalism fatigue. That's moral injury. And so, whatever it is you're doing today, whether you're being of service to people in the community or you, in whatever way you do that, whether that's your job or whether that's just the practice that you carry into whatever job it is you have, come in with a practice of compassion. Try bringing more compassion into each interaction that we have. Let's see what it would be like to find a way to feel connected to each person that I make eye contact with today. Let's see what it would be to feel and understand the connection that's happening, that's very real, on subtle levels deeper than our perception. What if we were to actually perceive those and feel that connection from a place of open, sharing, loving kindness? And tell me if you are not filled by the end of the day. Now, this doesn't mean you have to have a high energy output with each interaction. I understand that that's exhausting. Look, this isn't about becoming friends with everybody. It's something way more subtle than friendship. This is simply about seeing myself in every person that I come across today and loving it. And seeing everyone I come across today within myself and loving it. Loving it on a level that has nothing to do with my preferences or the things I like or the things that bring me joy or fulfill my desires. But loving on a place of absolute and total acceptance that you belong right now, right here, in this moment. That level of love. That unconditional, creation of space. So that's where we're coming from today. That unconditional creation of space. So let's do a little bit of practice to help warm us up for this day of compassion. Share. Try to adjust your body to in just a bit more openness to receive and release breath. This may include putting your feet flat to the floor or crossing them in any number of positions. Thinning the spine as much as you can without stress or strain. The shoulder blades together just a touch in the back, just enough to open the chest and open your heart, palms facing upward. Find any stuck places in the body and those places. Relax the shoulders, the neck, relax your jaw, your cheeks, your nose, your eyes, your brow. Breathe in through the nose to the belly. Release. Now, briefly, for this practice of compassion, I want you to picture someone in your life that you see as having made a wrong decision. And see you picture this person making these wrong decisions right now. These decisions that don't make any sense. The ones you think are just leading this person down a terrible path, a harmful path. Feel what that feels like in your body. Feel what it is to have separation, anger, resentment, scarcity. And then I want you to deeply understand that if you were this person, you had this person's life, and you had this person's pain, and you had the choices to make this person has to make, and you had all of the skills that this person has for their entire life, and you have all of the options available to you this person has had available to them. Had all of the same relationships that this person has had, working with the same toolbox this person is working with. And you have the same fears that this person has, and you have the same successes and the same failures. If you had everything exactly the way this person has had in their life, understand that you would be making the exact same choice right now. We have to understand this on a deep, fundamental level. Let yourself get out with some passive judgment about your own suffering and how you made better choices. This isn't you. This isn't them. This is a barrier that we did not create. So let's remove it. Let's remove the barrier of our own judgment and let's find love, simple love for this person. And instead of wishing someone harm or vengeance, wish them healing. Don't wish that you think they deserve. Wish them to get what. Breathing in through the nose. And briefly, let's share the meditation. Beginning with bringing our own awareness of ourself. You can repeat each line aloud if you would like, or just repeat it in your mind. Breathing in and out. May I healthy. May I safe. May I be at peace. May I be love. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you be at peace. May you love. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be at peace. May all beings love. Be love. Thanks everyone for joining this morning for the morning sit. I have so much gratitude for this practice and this shared space. So thanks for being here to share it. Please feel free to reach out. My name is Michael, and you can reach me at journeyhomemeditation@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on any of these morning sessions, or maybe you have a suggestion for something to talk about, or maybe you want to join me one morning here for the morning sit. I can bring you in remotely from wherever you are. We can share this morning practice together, have some conversation, and even from a great distance, we can share a cup of tea. So thanks again for being here. Audio.